Hey everybody, Matt here with Take Roads Less Traveled, and today on the Avalanche we are going to be changing out the radiator. Multiple reasons you might need to change out a radiator. The factory ones from GM have plastic tanks on the side and those can develop cracks. That's not the reason mine's having to be changed. But the other aspect is that the transmission cooler from the factory is built into the radiator housing. It's on the passenger side. If you look right here, you can actually see where fittings and everything are going to be at and where the transmission cooler lines go in. And even if you have an auxiliary transmission cooler, it's going to still use that as part of the series of cooling off that transmission fluid. And the reason I'm replacing mine is because I have developed a restriction in that segment of the radiator. And some people would say, well, just bypass it, just go straight to your aux cooler. Not going to do that. It's designed to be used in series. That's how I want it to be done. So we're going to change this out. It's a pretty easy job. It doesn't take a whole lot of time. If you've got an afternoon, you can do this just with some basic tools. So it's real easy, so we're going to dive right in. All right, so first thing first, we're just going to give ourselves a little bit of extra space to work with. So we're actually going to take this entire air intake assembly out. You can see I've got a different setup, a different intake tube than the factory. Mine's the K&N setup. No big deal, it's still going to be the same process. You're going to unplug your sensor right here, pull your entire box out, which if you have the factory box, pull the lid and then the whole thing will come out as well. And then also remove it from the throttle body itself, and then we'll pull this assembly out to give ourselves a lot more space. All right, with the intake out of the way, all we're going to do now is remove a couple of hoses to get them to where we can remove the electric fans from this horse collar, and then that'll give us access to the radiator. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to take this retainer clip out of that fan shroud so that we can get the upper hose out of the way. We're also going to disconnect the upper hose right here. So you just take a pair of channel locks, press in on that clamp, pull it back, you'll be able to get that hose off. Coming around, we are going to need to take this line, unclip it, and then we're also going to need to take this line, same thing, set of clamps, squeeze in on it, pull it out, and we'll be able to get this entire electric fan assembly out. Oh, one last thing, you have your wiring looms down there. We need to make sure we disconnect those as well. Do not forget that. You don't want to try and remove this with those still connected. All right, so now that we have hoses disconnected, the electrical loom disconnected, we can remove the two 13mm bolts that attach this into the horse collar of the truck. So you have one here, come around, and you'll see you have another one here. These ones on the outside are for the radiator, so we're going to wait on those before, but we need to get this electric fan out of the way. So those two, and then we can lift the entire thing out of the vehicle. Those out. Not catching on. Transmission cooler line still clipped in. There we go. There is the fan. Now we can come back and remove all of these hoses. They're all right here. Let me show you guys. So we'll remove this top hose, we'll remove the transmission cooler line that's plugged in right here with a fitting. There's a little cotter pin, I'll show you guys how to do that. remove the intake, and remove the lower transmission line right here. Same thing, it's got a little cotter pin that we'll need to take out, and then the lower radiator hose as well. And then, like I said, we'll undo the 213s on the radiator itself. We'll pull that out. This is the lower transmission cooler line. This is, I believe, the return. And if you look right here in this little groove, you'll see there's this little cotter pin right in there, and that is what holds the line in. The line has a small barb on the end that cotter pin holds in. My fluid's draining out right now, so what I'm using is I'm just using a little 90-degree scribe, and I'm going to take and come in and just come up underneath that, and there we go, pop it up. Now, some of the new radiators that you get are going to come with these little pins, these little cotter C-clips, but hang on to them just in case it doesn't, because you don't want to lose these, because otherwise that line will not come out, or sorry, will not stay in. When you go to put it back in, it'll just pop right out since it's a pressurized system. So with that out, all we're going to do, and you're going to get some transmission fluid, it's just going to take and pop that out. And we'll just let that sit there, get the lower hose off, and then we'll take and we'll get this upper transmission line off, and it does the same thing. It's got that same little pin right here that we'll take out, and we'll be able to disconnect, and then we'll be able to do the bolts that will let us take the radiator out. Alright, with everything disconnected now, we can remove the two 13mm that are holding in the radiator, and we'll be able to lift it right out. Just loosen it up. Now these bolts are the exact same as the ones that hold in the electric fans, so you don't have to worry about mixing them up or anything like that. It does not matter. So come over to this other side. This one out. Now, while I'm doing this, some guys ask why not pull off this plastic piece, because that actually does you no good. You don't need to pull off the plastic piece. You're able to see down to your condenser and everything, and you can see the backside of the radiator, but you don't really need it. So, you don't need to do that. So, now that that is out, let me see if I can set the camera up for you so it won't fall down into my engine bay. Okay, now that those bolts are out, all we're gonna do is tip it towards the engine. That'll let it drain out a little bit more. We're just gonna lift and pull it out. And that's it. As you can see, I have the AC condenser here. Now I've got a bunch of junk all down in there. I'm gonna clean all this out before I put the new stuff in. But here we go. So you can look inside that hole and maybe see the fins and the plates. I'm not sure if you can or not. But this right here is where this section on the passenger side is where the transmission cooler is at, and I'm pretty sure somewhere in there I have got a blockage or a restriction, and that's what's causing my transmission temps to be higher than they should be. So we're going to take care of that, and with the new one it'll all be good. So let's get the engine bay cleaned up and we'll get the new one ready. Alright, so here we have the new radiator that is going in. This will be the passenger side. You've got your lower radiator hose set up. Transmission return line right here. These clips right here, oop, little cat fell off there. These little clips on both sides are what hold your electric fan in. And then you have your manifold line your pressured feed line for the transmission, and then your overflow right here. And then on this side you have petcock, that other clip right here, and then your upper. Now, one of the things to notice are on both sides you've got your little mounting tabs, your mounting studs, and then also on the new one over here, it's got this little thing where you can attach a hose onto your petcock and actually run it up and hold it in there if you want. Pretty nice to have that. And then one thing that needs to be noticed is right up here. So this is where your bolt would run, and you'll notice that this is just a real big open space in here. You actually need to pull these rubber grommet and spacers off of your factory radiator, and they just go right into here, and all you do is just take, and it's just a little bit of rubber, so take and we'll push this in. And you'll have to work it in and everything, but you know, these have got to get into these spaces, one on each side, so that the bolts actually have something to hold on to, and the washer has something to hold on to, so that way it doesn't flop all over the place on you. So I'm gonna finish getting all the styrofoam off of this thing, like these little spots right in here. I'm gonna finish, I'll just take a vacuum and get all of it off of there, and then they'll be ready to go in. Okay, so we have the new radiator in. When it comes to putting these bolts in, you're gonna see that this rubber bushing gets compressed before you really start to feel it tighten up. But when we're putting this in, one of the big things to remember is when coming over onto this passenger side, just start at the bottom and work your way up. And don't forget with those transmission line fittings, one, make sure you're getting the correct one hooked up to the correct place. Shouldn't be too hard because they only reach so far because of different brackets and everything. Make sure you clip them in where they need to get clipped in, all that kind of stuff. But don't forget about those C-cotter clips that need to go in, and lock that line in place. Make sure that line is fully seated when you put those in, both there. Then you have your manifold line, then you have that upper line, and then above that is the overflow right there. So we're gonna get all this hooked up, and then we can get the fan in place. All right, so we've got the fans back in, we've got the radiator in, we've got everything on the passenger side hooked up except for the overflow. I'm gonna wait on that until after I put my air box back in, just because it goes over top of the air box or the intake tube. So it's just a little easier. But when hooking up the fans again, especially those electrical connectors, one, make sure they're clean, and then two, put a little bit of dielectric bulb grease on those connections. And what that'll do is that it just gives you extra protection there to make sure your fans are gonna have the power that they need to have. You're not shorting anything out with moisture or anything like that. It's always a good idea whenever you have an electrical connection that you've unplugged to put some dielectric grease on there, just to make it like 100% waterproof, making sure that everything's good to go. So little tip for you guys. All right, so everything is buttoned up, all the hoses and lines and everything are connected the way they should be. And now it is time to get coolant put in. You'll notice there's no radiator cap anywhere, and that is because on these trucks it uses the coolant bottle, or the overflow bottle, in order to feed the rest of the system. So we're gonna put coolant in that, start the truck, let it run, and as that drains down, we'll continue to put more in. Now, one of the things you need to remember with these GM trucks is that they do not use regular green coolant. They use Dexcool. It is the orange coolant. And a lot of folks rip on Dexcool because they say it congeals and it's gonna ruin your heads and all that kind of stuff. That is not true. Real early on, it was, but that's not the case. GM has corrected all those issues with Dexcool, and it is a perfectly fine coolant to use. The other aspect of that is buy the concentrate and then distilled water. So for every gallon of concentrate you have a gallon of distilled water, and make your own 50-50 mix. It's gonna save you some money that way, and it just works out better for you. With that though, this is an opportunity. If you do want to switch over to the green coolant, this is the opportunity to do it when you are changing out your radiator or even like your water pump, because you can flush out the engine block as well. That's one of the biggest things, is that if you're going to switch over, is that you have to make sure you get every single drop of Dexcool out of that motor and out of your cooling system. Otherwise, you are going to ruin your engine. You're going to absolutely destroy your engine if you mix those coolants together. For me, I'm sticking with DexCool. I've never had an issue with it because with regular maintenance, you're not going to have an issue with it. When you do the maintenance when you're supposed to, you're not going to have an issue. So 50-50 mix of DexCool and distilled water is going to be going in here, and while it runs, I'll watch that level and I'll top it off as I need to. Alright, so as I said, you want the engine running while you put the coolant in. That's just going to suck it all through. And right now, my reservoir is staying full where it should be. If I come around and I look, temperatures are slowly climbing up as it warms up, which is exactly what I want. I don't want it spiking or anything like that real quickly. And looking around at everything, I am seeing no leaks anywhere, which is exactly what you want. All underneath here. And again, no leaks coming from anywhere. So, looks like this is a job completed. So, pretty easy, not very time consuming. You can get it done. If you really know what you're doing, you can get it done in under an hour, to be honest with you. It does not take long at all. And even if you have a couple little hiccups, it shouldn't take you any more than 2 hours to change out your radiator. So, real simple job, and hope this guys helps. Or hope this helps, guys. I can't even talk anymore. But that is how you change out the radiator on an 02 to 06 Avalanche, 99 to 06 GMT 800 series truck. So, guys, I hope you have a great one, and always remember, take the roads less traveled.